Hello, welcome to our second event in the creative writing reading series for this semester. Just to let you know about some upcoming things, we've got Kazim Ali coming on March 20th. That's 2 weeks from today. Later on in the semester, we have Jamel Brinkley. We have we in collaboration, or Letras Latinas, with us supporting and cheering, is bringing Ida Limon with Carmen Jimenez Smith and Heidi Andrea Restrepo Rhodes. On April 17th, we have Cristina Rivera Garza coming, which should be very exciting. Woohoo, indeed. And then those are the main readings. There's a couple of EHUM things coming up as well, including Badur Alagra coming to talk about the interminable catastrophe, and Martin Wessner coming to talk about the films of Terrence Malick. Yeah. I have to say before we begin that I'm afraid that one of our guests was not able to make it tonight. Hilary Plum won't be with us tonight for personal reasons. She wasn't able to come down. However, her books are on sale after the reading. You should buy them because they're amazing. They're really good. The novels, the essays, the poetry, all of it. We miss her, but we're gonna charge on nevertheless with our guests, and I think we'll have a great time. So, I tend to assume everything is going to be terrible. Estimating about 90% bullshit seems safe, even generous. And this dim view, supported by experience, appears to hold for literary culture just as much as anything else. So it was with some skepticism that I first took note of this upstart little journal, staking a claim to some kind of Midwestern intellectual artistic perspective, the very idea of which coastal types might dismiss as pretentious and absurd. Yet it was a skepticism corrupted with the tiniest flicker of hope. There were good writers in Cleveland, after all, and I'd seen the great work Hilary Plum and Carol Pagel were doing at the CSU Poetry Center, and why not? Why shouldn't Cleveland have a review of books? It was, of course, through a review that I came to the journal, though I can't remember what the review was of. Maybe it was Hilary Plum's Whole Studies, or a review of Kim Stanley Robinson, or a review of our own Johannes Joransson's Luminous Summer, or some other amazing indie small press book. But I'm sure it was a sharp and interesting piece of writing, as most of the pieces of writing are in CRB. And one review led to another, which led to my subscribing, and then getting in mail the first volume of this remarkable journal. Do you have the first one here? It looks pretty great. I should have brought mine out. But anyway, it had a great design, and the flavor of the journal combined the urbane braininess of N+1 and the DIY punk aesthetic of 90s zines. And the Cleveland Review of Books put a stake through the heart of my skepticism and filled me with a rare and delicate excitement. So much of the news about literary culture is so often so dreary. This magazine closed, that publisher collapsed, this short story writer's a monster, that poet is flaming out in political self-immolation. It takes a strong stomach to keep hoping for something new and interesting. But every once in a while it happens. It's especially pleasing here in South Bend, Indiana, to feel addressed and included in a revitalized regional literary culture. Not regional in the sense of early 20th century literary regionalism, where strangers are always coming to town and character dialogue is full of apostrophes, but rather insofar as this is the place we live, and we read and write books here. And maybe our relationship to New York publishing, or what have you, needn't be the relationship of a province to the metropole, but maybe something a bit more, shall we say, barbaric. There's a general sense of isolation if you just like stick to the Midwest and kind of have this general fuck you attitude toward the coasts. Publisher Billy Lennon said in a 2022 interview, but you can spend time in the coasts and kind of be a cultural pirate instead. To which I say, avast, ye mateys. The Cleveland Review of Books began online in 2018 and saw its first print issue in 2022. The review was, quote, launched in order to fill a perceived gap in the city and Midwest at large. Their goal is to be the highest quality literary review in the Midwest. While not exclusively Midwest focused, they strive to publish writers of and from the Midwest alongside writers from around the country and the world. They published essays, poetry, reviews, interviews, and stories by Sarah Miner, Roldo Bartimol, Hilary Plum, Joseph Earl Thomas, Stephanie Burt, Sony Ton Aim, Zach Savage, Jacob Sheppers, Emmeline Klein, Astra Taylor, Annie Proulx, Stella Corso, and numerous others. It is a genuinely exciting journal to get in the mail, and I'm delighted to welcome the publisher and editor-in-chief of the journal here tonight. Billy Lennon is head tennis coach at Marymount School of New York. He has a BA in English from Oberlin College and an MPhil from the Center for Research in Modern European Philosophy, Kingston School of Art, Kingston University. His criticism has been published in Bookforum, Paris Review, and the Cleveland Scene. He's worked as a congressional intern, a paralegal, a copy editor at Dalkey Archive, and is currently the publisher of the Cleveland Review of Books. With him tonight is Zach Peckham, whose poems and essays have been published in Jubilat, Territory, Action, Spectacle, Poetry Northwest, Ghost City Review, American Book Review, and elsewhere, and have earned 2 Pushcart Prize nominations, and his poem Safe for Work won the Alberta Turner Prize from the Academy of American Poets. Zach has a BA from UMass Amherst and an MFA in creative writing from Cleveland State University. He's worked at the Cleveland State University Poetry Center and the Juniper Institute for Young Writers, and is currently editor-in-chief of the Cleveland Review of Books. They're going to read some of their writing, and then we'll engage in a conversation and Q&A and talk about publishing, book reviewing, and the state of the literary arts. So please join me in welcoming Cleveland Review of Books.
Thank you, Roy. That was really nice. So thank you so much for having us. It's an honor to be invited to talk here to this school whose football team I watched on ESPN so much growing up. Or something. I'm gonna read a couple of short pieces of criticism for Bookforum and Paris Review respectively, then read a little bit from the publisher's note for the first issue, and Zach's gonna read a bit, and then, yeah. So, this is a review of Jeff Dyer's Last Days of Roger Federer. This was like 2 summers ago. Yeah, a tennis match has at least 48 beginnings and endings. You need to win a minimum of 48 points to win a match. An orchestra traditionally receives a single round of applause at the conclusion of a performance. A professional tennis player at a large tournament is applauded after every point. It makes sense, then, that Jeff Dyer would write a book about tennis that doubles as a book about endings. The Last Days of Roger Federer begins by mourning what seems to be the imminent ending of the career of Federer, the most sublime tennis player of all time, arguably. This meditation leads to 2 intertwined questions that preoccupy Dyer for the rest of the book. What shape does a career, literary, artistic, athletic, take when the end is in sight? And how can we retrospectively make sense of the twilight phase of an athlete's or a writer's career? An avid tennis player, Dyer is even more avid as a fan. His appreciation for the game and the strength of his prose when describing players' styles are reminiscent of David Foster Wallace's famous essay, Federer, Both Flesh and Not. Wallace wrote about his experience watching Federer play in person, concluding that there was something metaphysical about Federer's play that others simply did not have. The way he glided around the court, the way he was able to create an angle out of nothing, the way he could hit the perfect shot for the match's context. These were all miracles to Wallace. Dyer notes more than once that he does not want the book to end, but like Federer, he knows that sooner or later, even the greatest players have to get off the court. That's one. Then this is actually a review of any gamers here, like a little bit. You guys know Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom? So I got to write about Legend of Zelda. Yeah, sweet. I got to write about Legend of Zelda for Paris Review. This is short also. So I've often been asked whether or not video games can be considered art. One stock reply I have is that the immersive experience of the video game can allow one to encounter simulacra of more conventional aesthetic experiences or practices. That behemoth new Nintendo offering, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, is a playground for such encounters. The player is encouraged to use a near infinite number of means, building vehicles, shield surfing, being catapulted by a slab of marble, to achieve a near infinite number of random ends, such as flying over enemies, sledding down a snowy mountain, or using the aforementioned slab catapult to shoot a ball into a hole on the face of a spherical sky island 100 yards away, not because they are required to beat the game, but simply because you can, and you find yourself wanting to. The game requires a kind of virtual athleticism. My favorite action involves soaring through the skies on a Zonai wing, a flying device shaped like a bird that disappears after you've used it for a minute. When that happens, if you time it right, you can spawn another one, fall onto it, and keep on flying. Tears of the Kingdom's art direction elegantly sidesteps the real-life graphics arms race that most major releases engage in and opts for a decidedly impressionistic aesthetic. The game designer, Shigeru Miyamoto, the director of 2012's Skyward Sword, whose art style was refined in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, has cited Paul Cézanne as a major influence, describing the graphics in his work as moving paintings. Within this aesthetic frame, however, the action is less modernist impressionism, more a postmodern fluxus, where actions are equally deconstructive and constructive, and activities that have conventional artistic correlates are designed to be toyed with, experimented on, and used for brazen or impish ends. The player can practice sculpture and engineering, building machines with Zonai devices, photography. An optional part of the game involves taking pictures of every item and creature with a smartphone-like device, and dance, combat mechanics that pay homage to the bullet time sequences of the Matrix. There's even virtual land art. One strip of terrain at the border of the map is literally Spiral Jetty by Robert Smithson, and scattered across the map are 13 geoglyphs that can be fully appreciated only when skydiving. The plot is a bricolage of key stories and myths from at least 5 different religions. The music is minimalist in the Ryuichi Sakamoto mold. Tears of the Kingdom isn't an escape from reality, but an advertisement for reality, including the aesthetic practices that already make our own. All right, cool. How much time was that? I feel like...
You have plenty of time.
Do I really?
Yeah,
okay.
Burn it down.
And all right, thanks. And then this is from the first publisher's note. So the Cleveland Review of Books, despite the fact that our existence is something of a perpetual identity crisis, was founded on a simple belief: that literature and perspectives coming out of Cleveland and flyover country needed to be part of the same conversations being had in the pages of established coastal and European magazines. Growing up in Cleveland and going to school on the East Coast and in the UK, the ontological center around which discussions were had always took certain ideological assumptions as their reference points. The avant-garde was a European phenomenon. If you wanted to be a writer, you went to New York. Williams College is a really good school, and it's important that you know that for some reason. If it's happening in New York or LA, it is therefore of national and global import, etc. CRB was founded as a fuck you to all that, with anger stemming from perhaps more than the lack of regional representation in prominent literary and arts reviews, the notion that someone's critical voice was somehow elevated because they lived in a particular place and were privy to a certain kind of education. Of course, I was also privy to a similar kind of education, an education that I was grateful to have. That education opened up totally new ways of thinking about literature, the world, history, and my place in it. Jed Detman, my advisor at Oberlin, in particular, was a major influence. He somewhat apocryphally quoted Jacques Derrida, a professor of his in grad school, amongst other things. Do we know that? Do we know that guy? Yeah, right? In saying that literature is more interesting than the world. When I'm living in a way where this seems true, I tend to be at my happiest. Starting CRB was, separate from any resentment toward coastal elitism or whatever, which I've realized over time to be a bit of a tired trope, an act stemming from this belief. How better to act on it than to start a book review tied to a mid-sized city in the Midwest as a gift to the culture that formed me, while also broadcasting the literary talent of the region to the connections I'd made with people in other bigger cities. Break. A formative part of my informal education was discovering publications like the London Review of Books and the New Left Review. Studying literature or politics felt like a totally academic thing. Having been raised to view any sort of reading or study to be tied to a pre-professionalist way of thinking, I didn't think of the study of these subjects to be ends in themselves or things that could inform everyday life. At least not as much as I wanted them to. Yeah, and then my grandma would like give me copies of the Paris Review and Lapham's Quarterly, during college, and that was influential. And she would talk to me about her days hosting authors who were coming through Cleveland to give talks at libraries and prominent cultural institutions, and would rant to me about how George Plimpton, one of the founders of the Paris Review, wouldn't shut up about his ex-wife when he was visiting. I was drawn to these characters, especially those whose careers in writing were launched by their involvement in founding literary journals. I began to seek out journals of my time and fell in love with the style of literary criticism and practical theory of magazines like N+1. I remember during the early days, when our identity was taking shape, aside from declarations and initial musings and manifestos saying that I'd like for CRB to be a version of N+1 or LRB that could be accessible to a Midwestern reader while also punching above its weight to a national audience. If my grandmother was hosting the likes of George Plimpton, why couldn't Cleveland have its own review of books? It was kind of an absurd idea, but given the fact that the Plain Dealer, which is like our local newspaper, stopped publishing serious book reviews, the void was there. The review over time has become a bit less about representing Cleveland's sensibilities to a wider audience, but bringing larger ideas to a regional readership. It's still those things, and more about defining a particular editorial vision with a certain grittiness and recognizable style. A journal that could over time be known for publishing work of extremely high quality while existing both in and outside of the traditional centers of the discourse. It has become about taking the general principle of publishing reviews that can function as standalone essays in their own right, using the book as both object of criticism and jumping off point, and making it uniquely our own, both in terms of an aesthetic program we try to articulate in our editorial vision and in working with authors, and as a retrospective reckoning with what we have published over long periods of time, looking at what we have become in spite of ourselves. It's still unclear what we will become exactly, but as ever, stay tuned and it'll be worth your attention. That's what I have for my readings. Thank you, guys.
That was great. Thanks, Billy. Thanks, Roy. Thanks to all of you. Thanks for being here. Hi. Hello. Welcome. My name is Zach. I'm a poet, so I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I'm going to read an essay. I've never read an essay. I've written them. I've written reviews. I've written essays. I've never read one to people in the world before, so I'll try to do it. What I'm going to read to you is, so we started doing this thing at CRB this past year where we thought we would have one of our editors each quarter just write like a little, in like the vein of an editor's note, but looser, trying to like pull or notice threads throughout what we were publishing, which like we don't have any themes or anything, it's all still. But, you know, attempt to like articulate what's been going on and maybe talk about whatever, talk about what we've been reading, talk about things. I don't know, it's loose. These quarters in review, we decided we'd publish on every solstice and equinox, because why not? So I wrote this essay for the review for the summer solstice. So if there are allusions to the season, that's where that's coming from. Otherwise, the only thing to note is that there are a lot of quoted fragments from essays that were published around that time. I'll do my best to sort of like change my voice when I read those, so you know, but I was like, do I get a sign? I didn't want to do this the whole time, that would feel weird, so. But whatever, it sort of turns into a collage, and then that's it. It's called On Embarrassment, Lyric Mortality, and Void Conf Testing. Oh, I need to drink some water.
There's some over on that other table.
Oh, good, all right. Thanks. I'm glad it's not too big.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, just sit over there. Oh, by the way, we don't have copies of the very first issue that Roy was alluding to because it's sold out. We do have copies of the most recent issue, Volume 1, which is our second issue. Our first issue was Volume 0. We're good at numbers. I'd like to begin by saying it would be ideal if nobody read this. Call me lawful good, but I'm just a little hesitant when editors write for the publications they edit. This isn't a comment on anyone else's actions, and I don't mean to suggest it can't be done well. It's just a personal feeling I can't shake, even as I do it now. It seems like an ethical necessity to maintain some professional distance. Professional being a word, a state, an idea I also struggle with ongoingly, forever in pursuit of work that will never become a career. And chiefly so if one is editor-in-chief. Really, we haven't found a better title for this position. Legibility is tyranny. Best to keep individual priorities, opinions, and allegiances out of the editorial projection in favor of the collective mix coming through. Play the bass. Be a prick in a greater tapestry. Like democracy could work, someone said. And yet the self remains the most and perhaps only suitable instrument available. Hello mind, hello body. Hello author and art, critic and culture. Hello essay, hello autofiction. Hello ideas we'll remember new words for and future ones we'll forget. Hello language, what is the world? Nothing to do but beat on, like boats or whatever, someone said. I often hesitate to name the things I like in private, never mind suggest them in public venues, and I believe this is not a bad thing. It was in January, while walking around to some bookstores on my first visit to NYC as EIC, just after our Volume 0 launch party at McNally-Jackson, and after I'd spent a morning strolling down streets I didn't know and speculating about what exactly it would be like to walk here regularly, or get coffee there, and own such an expensive dog as that one or that other smaller one, and rent such an even more expensive apartment as that one up there, in a place like Brooklyn, here, because how did people live here? Not just financially, but actually. That my friend and fellow Cleveland Review of Books editor Robert Giddings prescribed me Elizabeth Bishop's idea. I was struggling just then to articulate some highly ungracious complaint about a poem, what else, and locate precisely what it was about the poet who had written it and the well-reputed and funded outlet that had published it that week that was so very deserving of my adding to this innocent city's air and Rob's poor ears in such a pollutionary manner that being a poet is embarrassing. And, in a conversational extension peculiar to this moment, that poets should always be a little embarrassed by themselves and their work. This became my mantra for the year. Finally, hesitation. Not just about a poem or a poet or writing or editing or a culture or any particular thing, but work, art, creativity, thinking, life in general was, write it, vital. Shame is a practice, guilt a craft, embarrassment the only trustworthy pursuit and indicator of being able to be trusted, of having sufficiently dealt with one's subject, brushed the unsayable parts of one's being in language, the poem. It became clear that what had gotten me so riled up was precisely the absence of any kind of embarrassment in this poem and about this poem, on the part of the poet who wrote it, or the people who edited it and published it, or the people who were saying they liked reading it, had they read it, on the internet. To be so unembarrassed, and moreover, to not even permit oneself to be embarrassed, to be so unwilling, seemed like scientific evidence that whatever was causing my stumbling and stuttering reaction down this perfectly good public sidewalk on a clear day was part of the same family of allergens. I began to see embarrassment as the pinnacle of creative clarity and critical insight, a marker of quality and ethicality, a social orientation toward the world and a political aesthetic. There are many analogs. Wisdoms abound, attesting to the grace potential and transference of states of being or feeling from maker to viewer, folk aphorisms about craft espousing the virtue, and even necessity of surprising or scaring oneself in the process of making art, specifically writing, but why not the virtue or necessity of embarrassment? Maybe because embarrassment, not the charming, self-effacing kind, not the clown kind, but the regular human kind, is really difficult. To be embarrassed is to be in a witness state of pure compromise and compostability, revealing oneself as fundamentally assailable, mortal, knowable, doomed. It is considered unprofessional. It feels bad. It is a bad look. How is writing supposed to feel? Supposed to look? As we finish another quarter lap around everyone's favorite yellow dwarf, making the cosmic leap from one terrestrial season to the next, bud to bloom, we can only hope to have sustained an essential commitment to running a journal of writing and making that continually surprises, scares, and embarrasses. I think of Elena Basada's interview with Vicky Now, in which the author remarks, while reflecting on the practicalities of being queer and a writer, building a metaphor that is more than literal, I just love fruits because they are so pure to eat, and because I would need 5 or 10 or 20 books to fully capture the depth of this desire, I will say that a fruit is more of an innate writer than me. It took most of our willpower not to pull quote the end of this interview when we published it and shared it. Not because we were embarrassed, we were, delightfully, but because to do so would have been to ruin the taste, the surprise, the fear. It would have been a lapse in our, or maybe just my, faith that some degree of uncertainty in one's own project is, much like embarrassment, indicative of some deep and true power, even when that power lies in failure or refusal. Carrie Stow's review of Michael Palmer's doomed poetics memoir, The Danish Notebook, graphs this area, characterized by a suspended state of intentions or anti-intentions, where Palmer's book's actual project lies in its failure to answer the call to its own production, extending, however intentionally or a reactionary and anti-non-authoritative circuit in American poetics that runs wires through Oulipo, language, and objectivist movements and continues to produce connectivity today. Embarrassment is fundamentally anti-authoritarian. Dictators cannot survive it, and one mark of a tyrant is the willingness to resort to violence to preserve one's own unassailable credibility. Perhaps an effective Voigt-Kampf test for detecting a fascist is to simply gauge the subject's embarrassment tolerance quotient. The lower the score, the higher the potential for authoritarian tendencies. What's a tortoise? Is this the test now? One of the questions on the test could be, what happens when the search for love is over? Which Grace Byron asks in The Erotics of Yogurt, her review of Look at the Lights, My Love, Annie Ernaux's meditation on the grocery store. We open with Byron wandering the aisles of a Kroger in Indiana, examining diet culture by applying a socio-nutritional theory that foods are either milfy or not milfy, and contemplating how the big box store is a little errand to ward off the fraying edges of existentialism. For Byron, even at their most mundane, most troubled, most embarrassing, the elements of life, such as possession, organization, and food, are suffused with the erotic. And when is the erotic not a space of incredible potential embarrassment? If not in the present, then definitely in the future. Why else choose salmon over pizza, dark chocolate over ice cream, Diet Coke over Coke Heavy? Another question for the test. Popularly obscure yet critically worshipped author's name printed in black metal font on a $30 article of clothing. Ironically, no shade. We too traffic in merch. Besides, it's the manner of answering that reveals just as much as, if not more than, the answer itself. None of us are burning down churches in Norway. Form is content, style ethics, someone said. The test could also ask, what do you really have when it seems like you have nothing? As Philip Harris does in Children of the Atom, his essay on Cormac McCarthy's last 2 novels, which we, at the time, could not have known would also be the author's final. Harris's consideration of the end, not just in the textual details of narrative nuclear horror or shades of the extended shadow of a post-apocalyptic vogue that McCarthy and other modernist fiction writers helped cast over our present-day lettered field, but in a lyric sense, as a lyric state, what the end is, what the end means and how to be in it, locates aesthetic qualities which mirror a capacity and perhaps necessity for extreme mutability and embarrassment. Harris's end thinking is focused on McCarthy, but strikes one of the richest prevailing ore veins in contemporary literature, its markets and its discourses, the seemingly endless, often professed, rarely enacted, appetite for works and pursuit of projects about the world we actually live in, where bad things happen but only some clocks stop. They are messy and frustrating, the fractured chronology coming off as both interesting and ineffective. If literature reflects one thing about us in the end, it's this: our appetite, our interest in effect, interesting and ineffective. It's this, in the end. It's erotic and lyric embarrassment. It's quantum double fudge superposition. It's the way our ability to maintain our way of living relies on our ability to ignore information and tell lies to one another, and especially to ourselves. Aaron Margaret Day on Hilary Plum's whole studies. It's our powers of dis and reappearance, to come from nowhere, because the regional borders are porous, not just in those liminal zones that separate the South from Appalachia and Appalachia from the Midwest, but in our national self-conception as well. Benjamin J. Wilson on race, region, and the national imaginary. It's our impossible dual need for narrative precision and endless health for ourselves and others, as explored by Karen Balin, Rachel Bracken, Jason Harris, Zach Savage, and Valentino Zullo in a series of essays on wellness. And how once we find we can't have either of those, it's our pursuit of pleasure. So it's fitting that ecstasy's Greek root means to literally be beside oneself, as in the soul exiting the body. Death, near death, is a preemptive condition of the ecstatic. Cameron Carter on Gentileschi's Mary Magdalene's. It's the expression of craft and taste as an advocacy vehicle for the good, if hardly for the same good. Ishai Jusidman on the entrenchment of taste in the art world. It's literature at all. It's art at all. It's wasting time because time's a waste. It's a practice of excess, of the unjustifiable and the unnecessary, the costuming, the tanning, the crafting of a distinct style in service of the vision of what becomes necessary in order to get through the day or death. Guillermo Ruboro Gil on pro wrestling and poetry. How we rebuild imaginary palaces, vast and tenuous estates of maybe. Xiaoyue Shan on Helen Sisu's well-kept ruins. That we continue when none of this is for us, really. None of this is for anything at all. Sarah Catry on Megan O'Gieblin's God, Human, Animal, Machine. To be embarrassed is to be mortified, to get mortal, to not just be alive but to live. What for? I don't know. I hesitate to trust anyone who does. So watch your head, reader. The days get shorter from here. And remember, the most reliable indicator of whether you're dealing with a person or a replicant, a human or a fascist, will always be the least becoming. Everyone's the CEO of their own personal Enron, but no one worth their cubic carbon footprint escapes biodegradation, UV rays, afternoon traffic, or the totem to time, gravity, and liver function that is last season's bathing suit. Skip the bylines and go straight to the CV of failures and flaws. Some things can't be deep faked. See you again at the equinox. Until then, you have everything to be embarrassed about.
I guess just start. Why did you start the Cleveland Review of Books? Why would you start a literary journal? What were you hoping to do?
Oh yeah. I mean, I wish I had like a big theoretical answer to that, but I was just like lonely. Yeah. I always, like I said, I always felt there was not that kind of culture that I felt, I might have like imagined it, I don't even know if it's even that good in other cities, but it just, like shifting like the center of critique from where I thought it was to where no one paid attention to. So what you were saying earlier about South End kind of feeling like invisible in a sense is kind of exactly how I was feeling in early 2018. And I guess practically, like starting with that kind of like desperate urge for some sort of intellectual life. Cleveland at the time was very much like, it felt like there were like open mics and then writers. Like, I wasn't really friends with like Carol and Hilary at that point. Carol Pagel and Hilary Plum. There were a lot like people teaching in universities. Didn't feel like there was much like connective tissue between those areas. So yeah, it was that desire, and then the practical stuff is, oh my god, like these. I guess I can answer that question. But yeah, that's like the primary thing, kind of a primal reason, not really like a grand theoretical reason.
I would say, yeah. I mean, and I've really started the magazine in 2018. I've been involved since 2021. Started as managing editor and editor in chief. Yeah, I mean it's gone through a lot of different phases of development too. I mean, definitely started in the most upstart of ways possible. Like it was like a blog spot in like the first iteration.
It was like
Yeah.
me and this guy Jacob Brueggemann, who's also from Cleveland, and like it was just like, oh my god, we have to get up 2 pieces a week, like no process. Just yeah, it had like just kind of like a goose like or a duck, like their feet under the water.
And then I made you guys a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's all you got. That's all you need. Spreadsheet. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's there it is. That's all.
Yeah, the spreadsheet, great.
Yeah.
Well, and so how did, what was sort of the process of building it, and I guess reaching out to people? What were some of the things you struggled with, and what were some of the exciting like moments you had, like maybe a piece that you published that
For
you're
sure.
really excited about or something?
So when it first started, I made a WordPress, and that was like, I don't know, I published some stuff that I wrote, and then like what friends wrote. I remember like desperately asking people for like their favorite paper they wrote in college. But I got some really good advice from this guy Jeremy Bendick Kamer, who's a professor at Case Western in philosophy, who has some experience doing zine stuff, and just some foundational things like kind of like don't really publish yourself, like try to divorce yourself as much from the journal like, as possible, like just a lot of good advice that kind of like purified like I don't know, he helped me a lot with like realizing the vision, and then we just like kept at it for like 6 months, randomly publishing, and then the local alt weekly Cleveland Scene like asked to interview me, and then it kind of popped off from there. And a lot of people who had left the city, who were like in New York mainly, like reached out and said like, this is so cool, like if you need anything, like let us know. So there was kind of a wealth of, there were a lot of like sleeper agents ready to be activated. Yeah, I guess like our first piece was a review of Nico Walker's Cherry, and Nico Walker's from Cleveland. That was kind of a landmark event. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the time that I've been there, yeah, I remember, like, I knew about CRB before I got involved. And I was like, oh, this is cool. There's a Cleveland Review of Books. And I was like, Cleveland Review of Books? Is that name a joke? And I was like, I hope so. I love it. Like, it's awesome. I hope, and then the sort of fuck you energy, if it's there, like, I mean, I remember coming in and being like, wow, like, I hope that that's there. And I found that it kind of, was. For me, the exciting thing, I think, has been to kind of build a journal that is particularly interested in reviewing work that would not otherwise get reviewed, reviewing books off of the sort of like PR marketing schedule. So it was really exciting to come into the project and be able to like kind of build from that like kind of reactionary energy of like, no, like we reject timeliness. Like the book is around after it comes out. We want to kind of create space for exploration of like the form of the book review as a literary object itself, not just a sort of, not only appraisal, not like product review, but some other sort of stylistic, responsive thing. That has been the primary source of excitement for me, just getting to like have a small press attitude toward small press work. And then I think the big challenge or like scariness has been in our sort of, in the last couple of years of development, we've sort of like jumped over the fence into like formalized nonprofit territory. So we're sort of constantly, I think, like navigating philosophically, in our feelings, practically. You know, how do we sort of like embrace the parts of professionalism that will like enable us to be sustainable and do good, keep doing the work we want to do, without losing something, like losing some kind of, I don't know, some deeper, you know, level of freakiness that can't be sustained, you know, when you have to like submit grant applications on time and, you know, look good to funders. So that's like our kind of new identity crisis, but I feel good about it. We're doing well. I feel okay.
Yeah.
I'm scared of it all the time,
Right.
but
Actually, now that you mention it, we mentioned it a moment ago, I had the same sort of reaction when I first heard the name. I was like, is this like a parody, like
yeah.
Cleveland? But then I was even more excited that it wasn't.
Great.
Yeah. So what are some of the I don't know how the editorial process works in CRB, or how hands-on you were as managing editor, or you are managing editor, or you're the editor-in-chief now.
Yeah.
But so whatever. But in that process, like how hands-on you were with the pieces, or if you had other editors doing that for you. But what are some of the more exciting, a few of the most exciting things that you've put out? I mean, there's so much interesting stuff that's come out of it.
Wait, so one about editorial process, or are you more interested in like what we put out? Like, in that?
Whatever you want.
Okay.
I'm trying to
Yeah,
leave it open.
Yeah, we can do both.
Yeah.
I can quickly do process and you can do
Go.
70% about it. So, like, it used to just, it's really like formalized now. Like, so, we have like a really cool team of like part-time editors who all like work on a piece per month. And it's just really cool to work with everyone. It's a really fun team. Our managing editor, Bree Demanda, she like there's like a number of us like do the acceptances and stuff. Pieces assigned to an individual editor, and then they go back and forth a few times with that person. It goes into a different folder, ready for copy edit, and then it's put on the editorial calendar. And so it all kind of works like clockwork now. Back in the day, it was much more like, I gotta edit this now, because this has to go up. Like, we have to stick to Monday, Thursday.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Anyways,
Yeah, sure.
that's the process.
Yeah, like we're like just building like consistency. Because I think like one thing, I don't know, just maybe it's a riff on professionalism or something, but it's like if you're doing something weird, even if it's like inscrutable, it's kind of like if you just like keep doing it consistently, like as though you designed it, like it starts to like, you know, build some solidity and people, I think, I don't know, eventually there's some sort of readerly faith that's built up in that. Oh, well, they publish every Tuesday and Thursday, so.
Yeah, or just so something's there when because it felt for a while like no one cared.
Totally.
And then eventually they do, and then it's like, with all this,
Yeah. I mean, as far as the editing.
exciting something. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, just as far as the editing process itself too. I mean, like it's super collaborative with us. I mean, each editor definitely has like their own style, their own like areas of interest, and like that's when we were trying to like pull in other editors that aren't just us, right? Like we want like a diversity of areas of interest that can all kind of, you know, become unified, and whatever that weird combination is, like becomes the kind of flavor of the journal. So like, you know, everyone's got their own sort of styles and things they're interested in. In terms of like what we get excited about, I mean, you know, we're just interested in like the potential of the review as a literary form. So, you know, we get really pumped about things that are like playing with the form a little bit, like doing something unexpected. There was that review, I guess it's a review, that Chapman had.
Yeah.
So recently it's, published this review that it's like ostensibly a review of one of Ben Lerner's books. Speak of School, and this kind of like semi-obscure, like early example of like autofiction from the 50s called The Fan's Notes by Richard, if anyone has Bexley.
I think Frederick Yeah.
Actually, yeah. And it's kind of like it's talking about like playing with this idea of autofiction, but like it's just straight up fiction for the first third. And in that first third, Ben Lerner walks into a coffee shop and dies. And then there's the review, which sort of just transitions into seamlessly, and then back out into this like fiction. So like it's doing this silly meta garbage with the concept, but it's doing it well, and I think with a sense of humor and a sense of play, which I know for myself, like that's a source of excitement for me because, you know, criticism is a science, you guys. It's a professional science for serious people, suits, you know what I mean? And I love the notion that that's not true and that criticism is can be like a playful project.
And also about like specific things that like we're excited about. Like it is cool. Like it was kind of like a feather in my cap. I don't know. Like Stephanie Burke's writing for us. Like this prof at Harvard. What? And then like Hilary's obviously been like a hero for a while. And then I have friends who like do crossword. A friend who does the crosswords. One of the crossword makers at the New Yorker who did a crossword in here for us. So just like stuff like that is cool, but it's mainly like, I don't know, the pieces like Chapman's, where it's like these crazy pitches come in that like only they could write, you know, like they're just, yeah, like there's no like objective metric to like measure it to. It's like,
I think we sort of like move between, I mean, you know, we get excited about that weirdness and the experimentation, which isn't to say like, I mean, I also just love like a well done focused book review too, you know, so like we have a range within this, but yeah, we do get pumped when people are playing with the form or like doing something.
Eugene, the one of Eugene Lim's book.
Yeah, sort of
really cool. That was like a 4-book review.
Yeah.
Who wrote that?
Shinjin Day.
Right.
Yeah, these sort of like omnibus sort of like essay projects. I mean, one thing we talk about all the time is, you know, the idea that the review, our favorite reviews, right, are not just reviews, you know what I mean? Like they're kind of these like essays that are just like initiated by a text or through which, you know, thinking about a text provides a helpful framework or lens or connection, but, you know, ultimately is not, it ends up being about more, or like the reader comes away with more than just like, this book is good or bad. This person liked this book or didn't. It's like, I personally feel like, who cares? Like, I just do not care about that. Like, you know, I love reading things that, writing about things that suck. You know, like it's awesome. And it's available. And it's like a real sort of like impoverishment of the potential of our literary culture to say that like reviewing is only one thing, or you know, and it just I know I said this in your class, so I'm trying not to just revert to this time speech, but like it just the review world, like it can't just be Goodreads and the New York Times, you know what I mean? Like there has to be more in the middle, there has to be elsewhere, or not even the middle, on other levels or forms. So I think speaks to like where it's evolved to now, right? Or like kind of like where we're at. And
We'll open it up to questions.
Yes.
Questions from, yeah, Francisco.
Do you have a range in terms of word count? What's your sweet spot?
Totally, yeah. So we're loose with that stuff. We definitely like reviews that I feel like usually like at least 1,200 words, like substantive engagement. We try to be mindful of, you know, digital publication, like sometimes the scroll can only go for so long. You know, we have put up some like 6,000 word essays.
I just had to say 7,000.
Yeah. It's like,
I'm like Rilke.
yeah, and it's like, this is cool, this is a burner, let's have it, it's important. But yeah, usually it's like, you know, it's like in the 2 to 3K range is usually like sweet spot, but like we never like police it very hard. It's like if you want to go shorter, if you want to go longer, like trust, you know, we tend to trust our contributors too. Like we want to give, like editorially, like put faith in someone who's taking on a project to like take it all the way, you know. We don't have like a, you know, kind of like overbearing house style that everything has to conform to. We like having that variance. Yeah, it's a practical question. Good one.
You went to Oberlin. To what extent were you influenced at all by Field magazine while you were there?
Not that influenced, but I'm aware of it.
Oh, okay, because that used to be like
It used
about
to-
the
I
top
don't
of the
think-
heap.
Do you know if it's like still going?
No, it's gone now. That's
Yeah,
the thing. They
I graduated in 2017.
Okay, so it was about gone then too.
Yeah,
Then to
but I'm
what-
aware of like its history to an extent. Yeah.
To what extent is your project have to do with the death of so many quality magazines? For example, the Ohio Review used to be a big deal. Now it's New Ohio Review and it's gone. And there was a magazine that was actually pretty good in Seattle that just died called Image. I don't know if you're aware of it. Yeah, it just died. So, you know, there's definitely a moving of the whole older generation of quality things are gone or going.
Yeah, I think when I came out of college, I didn't realize how bad it was. You know, it was more just, it's just more reason to like professionalize smartly, like be sustainable so that doesn't kind of happen to us, you know?
Totally. Well, I think to your point, like I think there is a bit of the, you know, like that maybe concurrent with the death of like the sort of on-staff critic in, you know, like newspapers in general, and then newspapers publishing book reviews or like book coverage as like an aspect of just like the regular American like media landscape has sort of diminished, right? Like there's
Yeah.
only a few
Yeah.
places where that happens, and there's not a lot of variance. And the places where it's done professionally, I mean, I guess I'll just share my opinion, like, aren't that interesting, you know? And there's often a question, I think, of like, what is the book review in that context? Like, is it journalism? Is it PR? Or is it something else? Like, is it a literary, is the reviewer a journalist, a marketer, or a stylist, right? And I think, you know, there's not a lot of like market arguments to be made for the third thing, but I think that for sure our ability, or you know, just our like luck, you know, is kind of like coming from that like dark void that exists right now, where there just isn't a lot of established, you know, what to say, structure, right? Like holding that up anymore, and it's, you know, on the one hand concerning, obviously, but on the other, it creates this kind of like openness or like opportunity for other visions of what that can be, you know.
Two more other small
Yeah.
points. How are you keeping yourselves, so we talked about Harvard and all that, how are you keeping yourselves from falling into the trap of simply trying to emulate East? That's one question. And the second one, like in terms of the circulation, your magazine, what are you doing to make sure that you actually get out there? Because little magazines, you know, you reach people or you don't.
Yeah, a lot of it, a lot of like the subscriptions just come from online, but we are always emailing small bookstores and stuff. We had a conversation with Barnes and Noble over the summer. We're just like, you know, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
You need to have how many printed?
I don't know if you guys want to talk about distribution while we're here, but if you want to talk to me about distribution later.
It's important.
So I think it's like the defining problem of our era, actually, like truly. Like if you think about the non-diversity of books available to like most American readers, it's mostly a problem with distribution.
Yeah.
But
in terms of like emulating the East,
Well, one thing that I'll say is, you know, we do have like a regional commitment. You know, we when we're making decisions about who we're going to publish and why, for what reasons, like we are thinking about not strictly, but like to an extent, like where that voice is situated, where it's coming from. We publish writers from all stages of their careers, everywhere in the country. You don't have to have previously published, or you don't have to be a professional practitioner of literature to write for us. Like we really disregard that. So maybe that's one way in which we are avoiding emulating the kind of like Eastern careerist, more institutionalized, you know, because like truly like we don't care. I mean, we do, like, it can be cool, like Steph Burke, right? Cool person to write for us, but it's like, Steph Burke just wants to write for us.
Yeah, I mean, there are like people with like cool, weird visions out there too, and that's who is like attracted to us.
I think we also,
But also, I don't know, like, if someone, I really do feel an affinity with like all these Rust Belt. Like, it's really
Yes.
cool. Like, I feel like I don't want to say the bars, or if a pitch comes in from like Pittsburgh or something, like we're really eager to like we hope it's like good. Like, we want to publish that person.
absolutely,
You know, like
Yeah.
I don't know, like it's like really grand to be like, oh, we're like the flyover country thing. I think it'd be cool if like most Rust Belt cities tried something similar, but we're happy to like ride with like anywhere that's not.
I think trying to like attend to any kind of like regional perspective that just like isn't the East is going to be non-legible on the coast anyway.
But, like,
so you know, like
right.
we can't really fall into that trap. I would also say that I think we embrace a kind of like, I don't know, like this sort of like chaotic thread running through what we're doing. Like, at least like aesthetically, you know, there's inconsistency, there's experiments that fail, you know, like there's like all this stuff that like, I don't know, we're starting to like traffic in stereotypes a little bit, but I think that like having a sort of vein of amateurism, you know, it alienates some people, you know, and I think one thing that can guarantee a kind of like ascendancy or success is like trying to appeal to everybody, right? Eventually being absorbed into like another institution or something.
Yeah.
We sort of, wittingly or no, insulate ourselves against that by just like insisting on continuing to try stuff that we don't know will work.
We are like, I live in New York part of the time now, so like we are kind of like behind those lines or whatever. But the fact that we're doing well like really pisses some people off. Like, they wouldn't say it, but like the Harvard people, like they don't like. But
Well, I think we're always navigating that too, though. Is like how to be, because it's true. We do have some people on staff who live in New York, who live in Boston. We try to balance it, you know, and we try to think about like how do we maintain the sort of like spirit of this, you know, in a way that is tied to, like, it's called the Cleveland Review of Books. You know, like we are always trying to think about that. And yeah, it's a bit of like a crisis sometimes to think of like, yeah, how can we do that? How can we like be, you know, two things at once? Maybe we can. I mean, I really don't know. You know, we're just kind of always figuring it out. Which again, I think ultimately like insulates us a bit. I think as long as we are trying to like keep that spirit at the center of it. I mean, I don't know. If we start being too much like Coastal Magazine, I won't name for fear of being ungracious. Like, I'll just quit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not interested in doing that. You know, it's just what it is.
We have time for a couple more questions. Yeah.
So I was interested in what you were saying about, well, I was interested in what you said, but just like the advice you got for not publishing yourself. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that. And also maybe how and if your practices as like writer, as a poet, like integrate with your work as an editor and how those things kind of work in and against each other.
yeah, I feel like it's okay. I mean, it's obviously okay to publish yourself, but if you kind of like withhold publishing yourself at the beginning, it clarifies like why you're doing what you're doing. Like, it's like bigger than yourself. I think that's the main thing. It doesn't mean that every project will be a vanity project, but that's just, I don't know. Like, you look at there's so many like magazines on Twitter where it's like tweets by this person, like they just want their name to be like associated with something bigger than them, and it's just weird. I don't know. I don't think it's bad inherently, but early on it just like clarifies like why this has to exist. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
That our disagreement
In-
is conflict.
Yeah. But one thing, I think I'm kind of speaking for Zach a little bit too. Like we have like careers, right? I mean, we write, but I don't know. Editing for me, I almost like kind of gave up, like really writing. Like I did like write a novel on submission, but like I just editing is like my thing. Like I think it's like a calling in and of its own right. Or whatever.
Yes, I often feel bad about how much I don't write, but then sometimes I think about editing and the way that like Hilary, you were sort of talking about in the piece that you read, like how remaining involved in this kind of work, like your life feels a little aligned.
Yeah.
I think that, I feel that a lot, and I think editing, at least for me personally, like helps me like remain closer to writing when the world continues to conspire against me being able to do it, which is my own fault too, whatever, I'm not complaining. I do think that they are entwined like pretty inextricably, and I do believe that to be a good editor, like you have to be a really good reader, but like you also have to be like a really good like collaborator and like conversationalist and like really generous and like willing to listen to what someone's doing and where they're coming from. And I feel like that the scary part of editing sometimes is like, how am I going to ruin this? And I think that there's like I don't know, it's some toggle between like delicacy and not being too precious that eventually leads to the right thing. And that whatever that balance is, that I don't know what it is, but I think trying to strike it is also maybe instructive for writing insofar as like,
It can be like good for your writing, but but to be ready to like, I always talk about having like editor or like critic brain, like, because you're like looking over someone's shoulder when you're editing, and then whenever you write, you're gonna do that to yourself, and be like, this sucks. Like, I don't know. That's kind of like a phenomenological thing to watch out for if you get into that. Cassie?
Hi. So I'm here with the students behind me, and we actually came from Indiana University South Bend across town. So
Oh, wow, yeah.
so
Thanks
we
for coming. Thank you.
I'm happy to be here. But we come here, and it's maybe a little bit like your experience in Brooklyn, like looking around, like wow, they have that stadium and those scooters and that ginormous screen in their student union where we had Chick-fil-A on our way.
And like robots delivering it.
Anyway, but they're all here. They're involved in various publishing projects with me at school, and I'm just wondering if you can speak to just like some of the other practical. I love everything you're saying about sort of the passion behind it, the mission that you have, and what's actually doing it. You mentioned a little bit of like distribution, a little hints toward grants. I wonder if you could just in a kind of like just talk more about some of the practicalities of like, how is this funded? How did you end up funding the print? How is anyone getting paid from writers to editors to whatever?
Good question.
Yeah, we can also, if we can't get to everything, just let me give you my email after.
Yeah.
We can like in depth.
Thank you.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
Well, okay, I'll start by saying we're extremely lucky in that we have one source of funding that is reliable, and it's it's no one's full-time job to work on this, I guess I'll say first. And as an expression of ours, I mean the economics of like literary magazines make 0 sense, so it's just like, but if you enter with that understanding, other things can be done. So on the one, we do have like one source of funding that kind of like keeps us going. We raise money through issue sales. We have like some merch sales.
We're turbo driving like the grant funding stuff. Right
Yeah,
now.
we got our first grant last year, which is how we made this object. don't know if the people who gave us the grant are going to be very pleased with what we did with their money, but we'll find that out later. That's kind of like what we're exploring now, because like once we truly formalized as a nonprofit, which really happened about a little more than a year ago, I think. You know, we started to learn that like we needed to really like standardize a lot more things. So like now we finally have like real budgets and stuff, and you know we're really like kind of learning as we go in that regard. Our editors do get paid modest stipends. We do pay writers. We pay $100 for online publication, $200 for print publication.
When it started, it was 40.
Yeah. So and our mission is to kind of, as we build up a subscription base, as we maybe get more outside funding from sources we're comfortable with, to eventually like, be able to raise those rates. But right now we're in this like scalability problem, right? Like we actually don't have enough subscribers to really do that much. We don't do large enough print runs to even get distribution, right? So we're kind of like in this weird, I don't know, intermediary phase right now where we have to kind of hit the next level if we even want to do those things, but we choose not to. We'll see. You know? Yeah, it's kind of broad strokes, but
I'll give you my email.
seriously.
I do, but it's like the opposite question. My question is about the lake.
Yeah.
Like, do you think that the lake like funds the craziness of Cleveland, and do you think the lake wants you to do this? Like, do you feel like you have to appreciate the lake at all?
Yeah, Lake Erie. I think
Yeah,
so.
like Lake Erie.
I think so.
Like whenever I'm in Cleveland, I feel like I'm looking into the face of God. You know, I'm looking at that lake. The highway goes right into the lake. It's like the highway is saying it's over. Like this is your big chance. Like jump in, babe. And I'm just wondering if people ever go to the lake first.
I like the lake. I feel like it's the least noticed lake. Like people don't.
It's the shallowest
People
Great
don't-
Lakes. It's the
people
most
have eyes,
justified,
but they
it's the
don't see.
dirtiest, you know, most
It
polluted.
doesn't throw that weather at you like our lake. Like it doesn't hate you.
It's a really weird lake. I mean, I think that if there's a kind of craziness, like, yeah, I mean, the lake is, I don't know, it feels like a symbol of some kind of fatalism or something. I mean, the lake is like a symbol of Cleveland's one-time promise, right?
Well,
The
actually,
canal
I
isn't
mean,
there anymore.
like there will be people who say like, you know, like we're down now, but once global warming happens, we're gonna
We're
be
gonna have
flocking
lake.
here because we have this water. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's nice.
Right.
Yeah, it's the lake's fault.
So we love the lake.
I mean, my life has really been changed by living there. I lived in Michigan.
Yeah.
It just seems to really just like us. Like, frequently just throw crazy weather at us. So it doesn't feel like crazy. You guys pulled off with the major peak and that's all. Kind of a niche question, I guess.
Yes, I mean, I think the answer is yes.
In case she's watching.
Yeah,
Thank you for listening.
yeah.
So I think,
On that practical
I
note,
think-
I'm just saying.
maybe we could take one more, but it's gotta be
Yeah, more
weirder
practical.
than that. All right. So, make sure to propitiate your local lake.
Yes.
And let's have a big round of applause. Thank you.